Arntzen. I teach guitar now at West Fargo High School and West Fargo Cheyenne.
Okay.
This is my 8th year of doing that. And before that, I taught band for 20 years.
My name is Heather Mellows, and I teach chemistry honors and astrophysics at Gunn High School in Palo Alto, California.
My name is Colin Kloster, and I'm in my 21st year of teaching. I teach both regular or modern U.S. history, as we call it in Fargo, and advanced placement U.S. history.
I am Lucas Moldenhauer. I'm the science teacher 7 through 12 at Ashley Public School. And
why do you have your kids write?
The easiest explanation would be is I'm required to in AP.
And writing is all throughout the standards for every content, whether it's math, science, anything, it's there.
Well, partially because various bosses I've had and various presenters I've seen have said, hey, every class needs to do some writing.
Sure.
And for our school to be its best, every class needs to do some writing. And there must be something you could do that's writing.
The English majors out there aren't going to understand you if you can't write about it. You know, it is unfortunate that scientists have to know how to both communicate and how to do the technical things, but you have to, because nobody else is going to understand you if you can't write about it.
So a presenter that I heard in Beulah, actually, 25 years ago, said, even if it's only one sentence, make your kids write one sentence, no matter what your class is.
I guess the main thing for me is it's a way for students to organize their thinking and to demonstrate evidence to me, or demonstrate proficiency, that they know the material, they know the content. And I teach a very skills-based class as well. It's not just content. And so this, you know, there's 9 historical thinking skills that I target over the course of the year. I won't bore you with all of them, but argumentation and evidence are 2 of the big ones. And so writing is a great way to do that. It's certainly not the only way, but it's a great way to start off the year. By the end of the year, we might be doing more verbal, but at the start of the year, it's a way for them to organize their thinking and demonstrate proficiency.
But like so many kids then and now can't write a complete sentence. So if that's all it accomplishes, that's fine.
Of just reinforcing that fundamental skill.
That matters.
Yeah.
And writing for your job, you have to have complete sentences occasionally.
Yes.
And life isn't just text language.
I've seen how important communicating and writing and like digesting what you read and all that is in every part of life. And in science, like if you want to be a scientist, not all these kids do, but if you do, it's a lot of reading and it's a lot of writing.
Yeah.
It really comes with it. So it's a huge part of science, and I think it's a huge part of life, being able to communicate clearly and well-researched, and understanding what you read is super important.
They have a chance to really expose their misconceptions. You know, there was one, we learned two different terms that are kind of opposite of each other, but kind of the same as well: ionization energy and electronegativity. One has to do with attracting electrons, and the other has to do with the ease of losing electrons. So they generally follow the same pattern, because something that is better at attracting electrons is going to be harder to remove electrons from. But the kids were using them interchangeably where they shouldn't. And so that was, and I saw that pattern repeatedly, and then I could address it in class. So it gives me a lot of feedback in terms of, well, I guess I didn't make it clear enough how those things were different, when to use one and when to use the other.
And, you know, historical thinking is different. And a lot of students, you know, language arts and history are kind of like cousins to each other. Very abstract way of thinking and analysis, interpretation. But in terms of the writing, the style might be the same. But with history, students are a lot more uncomfortable with history, because they feel like they treat it as if there's a clear right or wrong answer. And history deals in the gray. We're not black or white. You can make multiple arguments on almost any subject, and you can probably defend it reasonably well if you have the right information. And they need to get that in their minds, that Kloster's not looking for
a right answer.
He's looking for a well-defended answer.
On Fridays, I typically ask almost every student if they have weekend plans. And I don't get much out of them. And I
Okay.
get a little bit. Most of them say, oh, nothing. But if I were to give them a card and say, what are your weekend plans? I'd probably get a lot more.
That's a good
They'll
point.
write more than they'll say.
And I think that's really the key, is that every student, because even in a class discussion, I mean, it's a pretty good day if I can get 5 or 6 different kids to participate in a meaningful way. And the kids who are unsure, or the kids who, have it wrong, are probably not the kids who are going to participate, because there's such a, embarrassment opportunity there. Yeah, it's important. I mean, at this school and in this class in particular, it's important to appear smart. And so the kids don't like to make mistakes publicly. So if they're not sure, they're not going to say anything. But in their paper, they have to say something, and then I can respond to it.
From like the beginning of the year to where you are now, how has their ability to frame and hold those things shifted?
Yeah. It's fun to watch. At the start of the year, it's a lot of, I don't know. Why does this matter? And by the end, it's okay, we've done this. Okay, here's the question. Here's the evidence we need. Here's where we go out and find it. Boom, boom, boom. Again, this is the ideal. Not all, every
Sure.
student learns at a different pace. But I would say most of the kids by the end of the year, they've got it down pretty well.
That's really cool.
It's fun to watch the growth. And, there's a sense of pride that you can see in them, too. That
Yeah.
sometime, typically around February, March is when most kids start to go, okay, this isn't a big deal anymore.
Sure. This is just what we do in here.
Yep. When they see it's
Yeah.
not going away, I'm not caving. We're not going to.
Like, what types of writing are kids doing?
Yeah. Well, it's guitar related in
Okay.
general, so I don't want it to be totally out of the blue. So every week we watch a YouTube video of a guitar player or a song that we're going to be trying or whatever, and then the writing prompts are based on that.
Okay.
So if it's a really great guitar player, like this week it was Johnny Cash, I asked them, number one, why do you like or dislike the performance you just saw? That's like the non-negotiable.
Okay.
You need to write at least one sentence about the video,
Okay.
because it's guitar class. You got to write about guitar stuff.
There's a few tiers. There's like 3, I would say. Research, like proper research paper writing, which
Okay.
we do some of. Then there's like presentations, like research presentation. Then there's fiction writing.
We actually do a lot of writing. I would say half of the labs that we do in chemistry are
Mhm.
accompanied by a lab conclusion. That's typically between half and a full page of double-spaced text typed, where the students have to make a claim supported with evidence and then provide reasoning. So CER is something that's pretty well known in amongst science teachers, and so perhaps the lab was about the activity of different metals, and then the conclusion would be to take 3 out of the 12 metals that we tested and rank them from least active to most active, cite evidence from the lab, how do you know, and then use your explanations or tie that to the science that we already know, as well as the logic behind the reactions that we did in class to explain how your evidence supports your claim.
And with me, what I do is every unit, and this is true for both AP and regular, we focus on what I call the big historical question.
Mhm.
I'll pose a very broad, open-ended question. Was the Gilded Age good for America? Was the Civil Rights Movement a success? What was the impact of the New Deal on American economy? I mean, broad, but the first thing we do at the start of the year, at least, is we'll break down the question. What do we need to answer this question? What kinds of information? How do we go about finding it? So it's as much a research as it is a writing process.
Yeah.
And as we get further into the year, I stop asking that question. And I just kind of rely on them to find, take the training wheels off, so to speak. And by the end of the year, ideally, I don't even have to ask them the question. They're able to formulate the question.
So the whole thing becomes kind of an inquiry, which is much more exciting than just saying this happened on this date.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
They do need that information for evidence.
Sure.
But no, it's certainly not the focus of my class.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, are they ever going to have to know Ulysses S. Grant's domestic policies in their life? Or do they
Every day.
Or do they need to know how to, create an argument and defend it? That's a much more important life skill.
Right, but the second type is like PowerPoint research presentations, and that would be they just research. They need to they need to follow the rules of proper scientific research, meaning no blogs, no Wikipedia,
Okay.
no encyclopedias, things like that. They need to follow that, and I personally don't make them do a formal works cited page for that either.
Okay.
They provide the links, or if it's a book, they just list the book in the year. And they give a PowerPoint presentation and then present it. I do that a couple of times. And then the formal research writing is our science fair that I require 7 through 10. And then if for those in junior and senior that don't, I have just a plain research where they have to do the in-text citations, the
Sure.
works cited page. It's 3+ pages. I have some of those science fair papers get to like 12, 15 pages long.
And how can we connect even the things that we learned last semester?
Mhm.
They're still relevant, and we have to connect those things together with the new things that we're learning now to see how all of chemistry is connected.
First, we make a list, and just make a list of evidence. What evidence could you
Bullet
use
points.
to support? Yeah, bullet points. Then we'll open up to a thesis paragraph with a thesis statement, and then we'll start. As the year goes on, we'll get into the body paragraphs and the actual, not just listing the evidence, but using it, applying it, formulating, well thought out, coherent sentences.
Yeah.
A rational, reasonable argument that an intelligent person would make.
And then once that paper's done, they put it in their written report that goes along with their data and their data analysis and their everything else in their binder that goes in front of their project. And then they can see how it's a piece in the puzzle of a larger research experiment that they're doing.
So the lab report itself generally has between 5 and 8 free response questions
Okay.
that would be more specific. So for instance, calculate your percent error and explain what could have caused that error. And that might be 2 or 3 sentences. Or explain why we had to do this particular step in order to account for this factor or something. So there's shorter writing as well.
Okay.
And those are generally handwritten rather than typed.
I will do, I'm like huge on like reading, summarizing, or pulling the good information out and then summarizing. So I get a free, you can find it online. I found it, someone shared it with me, free Scientific American classroom set. Every month a new one comes, and we do article reviews. In that, if we got like 15 minutes, I have a couple printed out that I will just be like, okay, ready to go. And
That's
then
a nice backup.
they'll read it, like 1 or 2 paragraph summary.
Second semester's formal lab is more traditional. They have a long and complicated lab that they do in class, and then need to write a full lab report. So they need a background and a hypothesis and a purpose and materials list, and then a detailed procedure. They have to write their own procedure. I don't tell them what to do. So they have to write their procedure and their data table, and they have to figure out what analysis, because all I give them is 2 jars, one labeled M and the other labeled X, and they have to design experiments to determine what M is, what X is, and what happens when you react M with X. So determine their product as well. And so that ends up being about 15 pages of text by the time. What I have never been taught is how to teach writing.
No, I was terrified at first.
I don't want to read 20 sentences. I'm not an English teacher. I'm a guitar teacher.
And I had never in my life been taught how to teach writing, how to teach reading, how to teach any of those literacy skills. And so typical young teacher, I suppose, in some ways, just trying to keep my head afloat, learning the content. I don't know when it started to change. somewhere along the way, I just, I tried a lot of different methods, and I was looking for ways to get writing in, and I found that the focus question not only gave them guidance, it gave me some guidance as well.
Sure.
I do it once a week,
Okay.
and I go over the card with them every week. And if the sentences are complete, I just say for next week,
Okay.
you need to put period on there, and or hey, you should probably have another word at the beginning of this sentence to make it sound complete. I should be able to read that and not know what the writing prompt was.
So I feel like I'm at a disadvantage where I've got a kid who can't get started, or he's like, well, no, I understand it, I just don't know what to say. And that's something that I think science education perhaps is missing. And maybe it's there now because, when I was in teacher school 17 years ago, writing was not as big a thing in science as it is now. And so maybe the current teacher education programs do address that more, although I kind of don't think so.
For a lot of old guys like me, it's just not something we were ever comfortable with. And so it was a growth period. It was an adjustment period for me to get to that point.
So what I do to keep myself on track is if I read a card and there's something on there that I think is noteworthy, something that they did really well, some interesting adjectives they used or interesting insights they had, or something painful or celebratory that I really want to remember to talk to them about, I put a little star by it.
Okay.
And then as I'm handing it back, I'm like, oh, you really didn't like this video, and the reasoning was great. Yeah, it is a little redundant, isn't it? It is a little noisy or whatever.
Two things that I found that are helpful is, one, giving them that sentence stem to get started.
My favorite song this year has been Boulevard of Broken Dreams because I like the strum pattern. So I don't want them to say, this was the worst video I've ever seen, period. They can say, this was the worst performance I've ever heard because it was too repetitive, period.
And the second thing that I've been experimenting with is choosing when do I need it written and when is this really about hearing what kids know. Sometimes the best way to make them write is to actually make them do a Flipgrid video where they explain to me orally their thinking. And if the objective for me is hearing what they know,
right,
you need to answer like, through this chemical reaction I saw, and then just fill in the blank, but just speak it.
We watch the video and write on the cards on Tuesdays. And by the way, it's just a note card. It's less daunting for them to say, okay.
Filling this is way easier than filling a blank page.
Right. Very few of them balk at that because it's just that little card.
It's tiny.
Yep.
They do. So twice a year, once in first semester and once in second semester, they have what I call the formal lab. And first semester, I give them a collection of data about an alien set of elements, and they have to sort them, and they have to create a periodic table, and then they have to write a chapter of this planet's chemistry textbook. And so they have to they have to decide how they're going to organize it. They have some guiding questions to help them focus what they need to say.
I have my 8th graders write a story about that they saw either a lunar or a solar eclipse. And I just give them a prompt that says, you and your friends are going to see either lunar or solar eclipse, and you can pick which one, but you need to explain in your story what is happening with the sun, moon, and earth, the shadow that's created, the different types of the shadow, a couple of vocabulary words. Other than that, it's completely up to you. And I found that if they can make up their own story, that they actually remember the vocabulary a lot better because they have to think about how to use it in their story.
I don't care if they say it was good or bad.
Right.
I care about, well, how do you prove it? Prove it to me.
Yeah.
Give me a solid argument, prove it, and you'll do well.
And they have fun with it. They put little sidebars of mining on planet Olam, and then they create their own figures and example and things like that. And then there's a meet the author section at the end of their textbook and there are some undiscovered elements,
Okay.
because there's some holes in their periodic table, and it's always very interesting how they decide to name them. Often they name them after themselves.
Sure.
Jenniferium and things like that. And often they name them after me, which I think, is probably an attempt to curry more points.
And then I have other writing prompts based on the week. Usually another one about the video. I usually have an irrelevant writing prompt,
Okay.
like, what's the best thing that happened to you in the last week? What stresses you out?
Okay.
Or whatever. And then my final writing prompt is always, what's making you mad, sad, or glad today? And almost every kid does that one.
And another one that I do is for mechanisms of evolution and biology. So I give them two prompts they can pick from. With these, I always try to give as much choice as possible so they can get into it. One is like World War III happened. There's nuclear bombs everywhere. Everyone's dead except for this population and this population. Use these vocabulary words to describe what it would be like after 500 years. And then the other one would be, the other one I have is the Olympic Village decided to make their own community and no one's allowed in or out for 500 years. Tell a story about that.
What would happen?
Those are like 3-pagers because it's 10th grade. And then they have vocabulary and stuff. And some of those turn out really, really cool.
Does the act of having students write shift your relationship with them?
Yes, because I'm not just in front of a room lecturing. I'm at the tables with them while they're compiling evidence. I'm sitting with them. I'm looking over their shoulder. I'm answering questions. I'm much, well, like you and I are here. I'm not a distant figure in the front of the room just pointing at slides.
Yeah, I don't want the stuff that's touchy-feely to be required. I don't want them to feel
If a
like
kid's not comfortable.
if they don't want to bare their soul,
They're
that's
fine.
totally fine. But a lot of them do. They want to tell me how they're doing. And sometimes it's tough stuff.
Yeah.
And they know that I'm going to talk to them about it in a compassionate way. And I want them to feel that they can get that from me if they need it.
Sure.
And occasionally I'll have a kid who never writes anything about how they're feeling. But almost everyone,
That's
I am
so
glad
cool.
today because I am sad today because I am stressed today because.
I feel like they're much more comfortable in my room. Again, it takes a while.
Right.
Because they're reluctant at the start of the year. Who's this Gloucester guy and why is he making me do all this stuff? But those walls come down fairly quickly.
Yeah, it gives us a way better relationship. And it's a way for me to know them in a better way. And I have some trouble hearing speech.
Okay.
I hear music great, but like hearing talking, it's hard for me to get to know kids by talking to them one-on-one.
Okay.
So it really helps for them to write it down. And then I can say, oh, man, your grandma died. That's awful. Tell me about that. Chairs are spaced apart in my classroom because guitars are wide. I can crouch down beside a student and talk to them and not have the other kids here. Plus, they're all playing. They're all
Warming up, they're all practicing.
guitar kids
whatever.
like to play.
Sure.
They don't talk all the time. They play all the time. So that keeps it anonymous. And I also, to keep them from feeling invaded on, I always do it like this.
Okay, so you're side by side, not like right
Yep.
onto them.
But if it's tough stuff, I'm going to crouch down or sit on the chair beside them. If there's an open chair, I'm going to get beside them, and we're going to both be facing the same direction, so that if they're like Darcy and might cry or whatever,
Yeah.
at least I won't see them crying,
Sure.
and they're more likely to feel comfortable with that.
How do you do that with your busy, like as a teacher, and your whole schedule?
That is a real issue.
I just make time for it.
Those fictional stories, they want me to grade them as fast as possible. Have you read it? Have you read it yet? I put this in there or whatever.
So we do the writing on Tuesday, and then I correct them. And then on Thursdays, I make time at the beginning of class to hand them back. And it takes 10 or 15 minutes. It takes a long time, but it's worth it.
Even the 1-pagers, I try really hard to get them back in a week.
Mhm.
but I don't always make it, especially if they do have a lot of misconceptions and I end up writing a lot of feedback.
And I will say that the research paper, they want me to read it because they want me to find everything that's wrong with it and they want to make it better. We had 57 science fair projects, and that's 57 research papers.
Right.
And it takes me a hot minute to correct them all. So they're like, correct mine first. You know, a lot of them are that way. So I think over the years I've done a good job of pumping them up for it and getting excited about writing, which I'm pretty proud of.
And so they don't always get the feedback as quickly as I'd like them to, which I feel bad about, but I also like to sleep. So
In my early years, I just subtracted sleep and then put in work. And then over the years, it gets easier. You find, like, I can type notes. I can type an entire chapter of notes faster than you ever believe. You just get better at it.
Because I think the fastest that I've gotten at grading a 3 to 5 page paper is about 10 minutes.
Yeah, me too.
And when kids are always impatient of like, when are you going to have our papers back? I will say, in an ideal environment, I can grade a paper every 10 to 15 minutes.
Yep.
I have 90 of you. So how long is that? How many papers can I grade in an hour?
I actually have a poster in my room with that
Yeah?
information on it. Yep,
Oh, that's
how long
handy.
it
That's a
takes.
great idea.
If someone
Just
asks,
a
I
reminder.
point to the poster.
For the really big ones, I put a meter up on the board. As I grade them, I will change the color of the meter to indicate the ones that I've graded.
Sure.
And I find that with that information, that stops all questions of when are we going to get them back? You know, are they graded yet? All of that, which, because in this case, there's nothing that depends on them. Like the one pagers, they need to learn that in order to do well on the test, right? Because it's not completely formative, because I do give it a grade, but it's a small grade in comparison to the unit exam. And
Right.
so, but there's nothing that depends on it.
And you make a good point too, how much time we try to dedicate to what we're grading. It's okay if we adjust that based on how much is current learning dependent on that writing. And so it's okay to give ourselves as teachers, to give ourselves the break of saying, this is okay for them to not get back for a while.
It does get easier too. I know that was my big.
It does.
It's a lot of teachers' concern. A lot of
Yep.
concerns that teachers
How do you
have is,
balance that time?
Yeah, how do if they don't know how to do it? Well, I would encourage them to take the leap. You'll get better. The kids will be better for it.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily get easier. You just get better at it.
Yeah.
As a grader, you get more efficient. You know what you're looking for, and that in turn makes you a better teacher of reading and writing as well.
This is my 4th year now. So I now make myself go to bed at 10.
Would you ever go back? Would writing ever leave?
No, I really think it's worth it. It's like, if you want your guitar players to be the very, very best they can, does that mean you spend every second of every class working on guitar songs? No. We would get burned out. So sometimes we're working on the skills to be a guitar player, and sometimes we're working on relationships. And like we were just talking about, and sometimes you got to have downtime.
Sure.
I mean, it can't be play constantly. Sometimes there has to be something different.
I can't imagine a scenario where it would. It's such it's really the backbone of my class in so many ways now. They're a pain in the neck to grade, and it's a time sucker for sure.
Right.
But it's also, I truly think that kind of writing, or that kind of, it's the most authentic assessment of gauging where students are at. Multiple choice, you've got a 1 in 4, 1 in 5 shot of
Sure.
guessing right. It doesn't know, and multiple choice, you can't move beyond level 2 questions anyway.
Correct.
So I just think it's the only true way to gauge.
My way of making sure I haven't lost their voice is write something down for me every week, and then I know them. And for the people like me, when I'm in a group, I don't participate
Sure.
unless everyone else is kind of quiet. But if there are people speaking up, I'm just going to be in the background, and I might want to be heard, and I might want that teacher to hear me, or that presenter to hear me in some way. And if I can at least write it down, now I feel heard. And I think we all need to feel heard.